What's good, TMG fam? It's your boy L, and I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute, man. Listen, we about to get into 3 true cemetery horror stories to give you goosebumps. Now, cemetery horror stories. Now, I ain't gonna say we all, me, I remember running around as a kid playing hide and go seek in cemeteries and stuff like that. Never really conceptualizing, never really thinking about where I was at, or you know what I'm saying, just putting things into perspective. I never paid attention to it until I got older. So this is probably gonna be crazy for me, extra crazy for me, because I'm gonna be thinking back to all the times that I played around in a cemetery. All right, the next video we're gonna check out is one that I hate spiders, bro. I don't like spiders, man. Bump that. Spiders is just, I don't know, man. They the devil. They the devil, bro. They the devil. That's the best way to put it. But we're gonna check out 5 terrifying spider horror stories. 5 terrifying spider horror stories, man. All right, so if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, man. Join the fam, and let's get to it.
When I was 19, my friend Sean, who was a big goofball, came over to chill in our basement as he often would during the summer. I remember he had a Coke bottle in his hand and I was eating Wendy's when he said we should check out that creepy little cemetery across town. It was the most random idea ever, and I even told
See, your friends will always get you in something, man. Always get you into something.
him that. Still, we had no school the next day, and I knew exactly which cemetery he was talking about. I don't know if one should even call it a regular cemetery. It's just a small plot of land with maybe 100 tombstones at most. The tombstone's very archaic looking, and any time we'd pass, there would be no signs of anyone having come to visit within the last decade. The site probably dated back centuries, and it had this super creepy vibe to it because it was closed off by a gothic metal fence, and it was surrounded by woods on 2 sides, the road on one, and some old abandoned building on the other. Everything about it just gave scary vibes. It took a little persuading, but Sean managed to get me to want to check it out too. Ironically, it was a very cloudy, wettish kind of day, I guess conveniently adding to the mood. Sean pulled up his Honda to the side of the road. I told him to pull up more so it wasn't obvious. This was a low traffic road, so it would look kind of suspicious. He pulled up a few hundred feet down the road, and we got out and cut through the woods so that any potential passing traffic wouldn't see us entering the little cemetery. Hopping the fence in the woods was easy. It was maybe a 3 or 4 foot fence. Sean kind of took the lead on this since it was mainly his venture. He led us through the eerie little plot of land, and we looked at the archaic tombstones. They all seemed to be from the 19th century. The writing on some of them was illegible at that point. I know it sounds super dumb and cliche, but I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched constantly.
I know it might, you said it might seem, but it was still dumb.
Looking around the surrounding woods. I told Sean how creepy this was. I know, he replied.
What is it about cemeteries, bro? Like, maybe it was because when we were younger, every scary movie or horror film that we watched, to set the scene or to set the tone for that movie, what did they always use? A scene of a cemetery or a view of a cemetery to kind of set the tone. So that's why it just creeps you out.
Still, with the feeling of being watched, I looked at the abandoned building next to the cemetery, at one of the windows. For a brief moment, I knew I saw someone standing at the window, even through the fog, smudge, and dirt on the glass, but they casually either ducked or walked away from the window. I told Sean we were being watched by someone in that building, and he turned to look at it as well. Then he went to look for the entrance to it. I told him don't. I said we should just leave before we get in trouble. I stayed still by the tombstone he was looking at while he walked around the building, and then he found a way in. He called me over, but I stayed put. Then I heard some loud kind of crack, so I looked in that direction, and there was this older man, probably around 55. Gray hair, had on a black raincoat, I believe he was wearing jeans, and he had a mustache, but that's all I really got of him. Then he opened his mouth and screamed, not just yelled, he screamed, "Get out." He screamed it so loud I thought I saw birds fly away from being startled. And just like that, I started to feel lightheaded, and suddenly everything went dark. The next thing I remember was waking up to being dragged in the woods. I freaked out thinking I was being kidnapped, but when I turned and got up, I saw it was just Sean. Sean was freaking out about something. He told me to follow him and run back to the car, so I didn't ask questions.
See, you that friend. You that friend. When something goes wrong, you gonna pass out? Hope none of my homeboys is listening, none of my friends. But we'd have left you there. Ain't that right, TMG fam? Look at me trying to get y'all on my side. We'd have left them there, right? Listen, why are you passing out, bro? This is the time where we need to run. Like, our body need to be catching up with our souls that left a long time ago. Come on, fam. Don't be blacking out at a time like that, because now I'm going to question our friendship, bro. You really wanted us to get killed because you decided to pass out. Now, I gotta question our friendship.
As we ran through the woods, I heard something close behind me, and when I turned, I realized we were being followed by someone, so I ran even faster. We got to his Honda, and he basically put it in drive before the car even had a chance to fully start. When Sean was inside that abandoned building, he found a sigil of Baphomet painted on the wood floor, which is basically the sign of Satan. Around it were a bunch of freaky dolls with buttons for eyes. He didn't get to see anything else in the building, because he heard the old man scream at me outside. He came running to find me passed out on the floor, and he saw the old man slowly walking over to me. He started to drag me away from the old man and into the woods. He actually literally picked me up and threw me over the fence to get me out. I quickly came back to consciousness, and that's when we ran. I had only fainted one time in my life, and it was at that moment.
The wrong time. You picked the wrong time to faint.
I don't know why I fainted, but it happening at a graveyard with some kind of satanic ritual building right next to it makes it that much stranger. My grandpa passed away a few years ago. I was always very close with him. This past July, on his birthday, I paid him a visit at the cemetery. The cemetery he and my grandma chose to be buried at was about an hour drive from my apartment. My family lived closer, so they all went to his grave together. I had to go separately. It was a rainy, depressing day, and there's nothing worse than visiting a cemetery on a gloomy day. The gatekeeper of the gate asked for the plot number. I gave it to him and he let me in. It's a pretty big cemetery, and I'd only been there a couple other times. Not as the driver though, so I had a hard time finding it. I didn't see many other people, if any, at the cemetery that day. I'm sure the weather had something to do with it. Eventually I found his stone and parked my car in the grass to the side. I put some flowers down under his stone, stood there for a while with my eyes closed, and prayed. When I finished my prayer, I opened my eyes and looked up. There was an old man standing about 5 rows of graves down, but directly across from me, and he was looking right at me.
Whoa,
I knew
creepy.
this man though. It was my grandfather. But
What?
no, it couldn't be. I rubbed my eyes and he was gone. Did I just have a spiritual moment? Or were my eyes and mind playing tricks on me? Either way, I got the chills and I had goosebumps. I was quite honestly freaked out. I got back in my car, said, "Love you, Grandpa," and drove off.
Nah, Grandpa. Nah. Love would have been out the window. You'd had some explaining to do. Nah, ain't no love right now.
I felt like I had a headache on my way home. Not sure why. I was the only car on Prospect Road, a quiet road with dense forest on either side. Commonly, there would be deer crossing here. As my car zipped down the road, I spotted someone on the side of the road coming up, which was odd. There were no sidewalks or a walking path on this road. I slowed down. It couldn't be. It looked like my grandpa again. When I realized this, my heart dropped 1,000 feet, and I swerved the car accidentally. I desperately tried to regain control and come to a stop. Luckily, my car didn't end up in a tree, rather just skidded out in the middle of the road until coming to a halt. I immediately looked back to where I saw him, and I saw a deer on the side of the road, looking at my car. My heart was literally racing. I was terrified. I was not well, and I needed to get home. I made sure no cars were coming and got back in my lane.
Now you're taking Grandpa home with you, see?
I focused on the road as best I could given what I had just seen twice. I felt weird the rest of the day. Not sick, but something wasn't right with my head. I went to bed early after watching an episode of my show. I woke up at like 2 in the morning to my phone ringing. It was an unknown number. My heart started racing again. Any call at this hour couldn't be good news. I accepted the call and put the phone up to my ear. There was static on the other end. Finally, I said, "Hello?" More static. But what I thought I heard next, I couldn't believe. Just briefly, for maybe half a second, I thought I heard my grandpa's voice over the static.
Oh no. Oh no.
I tried to say hello again, but I was too shook.
For what? For what? What, you want to talk to him? You want to know how you doing? Why would you keep saying hello? Man, I'd have slammed that phone so...
Part of my body was actually shaking. Then the call cut to silence and ended. I called my phone provider the next day to trace the number. They couldn't. They didn't have enough data to trace it, apparently. Though I don't know if that was just bullshit or not. The events that took place that day and night were the scariest I've ever experienced. Do I think my dead grandpa was trying to contact me? I don't know.
Yes.
That sounds ridiculous. You'd think if you experienced something like this, you'd be so full of emotion and joy. But no, it still terrifies me. And I really still don't know what to think or how to feel about it. Whether it sounds ridiculous or not, this happened. And I wonder almost every other night, was that really my grandpa on the phone? My friends and I were very stupid when we were teenagers.
I think a lot of us could relate to that statement.
I was like 17 or 18 when this happened. It was the month of October, and I wanted to do something scary in the spirit of Halloween. There's a small cemetery about 10 minutes from where I live, and when I was drunk with a couple friends, I said we should sneak into it. I'll make up some names for my friends, Ryan and Mike. We were at Ryan's house. He didn't drink ever. So when I came up with the idea, he was the one to drive us to the cemetery. Mike and I were really the ones leading this. Ryan was just along for the ride. But then again, he hadn't been drinking. Ryan parked in some parking lot across the street. It was a ghost town because it was past midnight at that point. We made sure no one was around to see us as we hopped the fence into the cemetery. It wasn't exactly pitch black out, but it was slightly hard to see more than 10 feet in front of us. So we were all using our iPhone flashlights. There didn't appear to be any night security in the cemetery, so we kind of dispersed from each other. Ryan seemed to be following Mike more closely. I could still see where they were because of their flashlights. I went off a little further on my own, and I decided I'd start taking a creepy video. So I started recording with the light still on, of course. I recorded a bunch of old headstones and the general eerie vibe of the cemetery at night. I didn't see Mike and Ryan anymore, so I started to go look for them, still recording. I looked at my phone screen and froze. There was a woman, dressed in a white gown or a dress, I want to say, with long, gray-looking hair. She was looking down at the ground. I looked up from my phone screen to look at her in person, but she was gone. I started to back away. I looked back at my phone screen, and there she was again. Only now she was looking into the camera, or rather looking at me. I looked up from the phone again and could not see her once more, so I looked back down at the screen again, and there I could see her moving closer to me. I started to scream for Mike and Ryan as I sprinted away from that spot. I couldn't see their lights anywhere, and they weren't answering my screams. I had a feeling they were going to try to scare me.
Because his scream probably wasn't a manly scream at all. It probably sounded like a female, which I ain't knocking them for. I'm just saying, they probably didn't recognize their scream.
So I ran back for the fence of the cemetery to hop it and get out. I made it to Ryan's car and texted the two of them saying they need to get out of the cemetery now. They met me at the car minutes later. We all sat in the car and I showed them the video I took. They had the same horrified looks on their faces I did. Now that I was actually watching the whole video, I could see the moment the woman slowly lifted her head from looking at the ground to looking at me, and then she starts to move towards me. We could only see her moving for like a second or two before I start screaming in the video and running away. But the way she was moving, we could see no leg movement. It almost seemed as though she were floating to me. I have that video saved on my old iPhone 4S, but the stupid thing won't turn on. It gets stuck at the Apple logo. I don't want to reset that phone until I can get that video off of it somehow. My friends firmly believe the woman in the video was a real, living person who also happened to be in the cemetery that night. But me, having been the one to actually find her, and only being able to see her on my phone screen, well, let's just say I was never a believer in the paranormal until that night.
All I know is his friend's lucky because the text they would have got was, I'm at the car and if I'm leaving, I'm out. I'll send help.
I spent a solid weekend playing on the computer a few years ago, drinking a lot of ephedra and coffee and generally not sleeping much. Every so often I'd feel an itch on my arms, like a loose hair falling on them. I'd brush it off and go back to staring at the computer. As this itching was happening more frequently, I started wondering if I was just imagining things or delusional from the tea and insomnia. But then I noticed what appeared to be tiny spiders on my arms. Am I going crazy? Are these drug bugs or what? And I went back to the screen. Then I saw the strings of thin webs glistening in the light and tiny spiders floating past my vision. They were real indeed. I noticed a hole in the ceiling where they appeared to be falling from. I blasted a can of wasp spray into the hole and hundreds of these little spiders began pouring out, streaming from their webs. Hundreds of them, all over me.
You could have a house. You had a house, you had a car, you could have everything in it. It's yours. I gift it to you. I'm out. I'm out. Nah, fam.
I got home from work late one night, was walking onto my front stoop, when I walked right into this huge spider web. At first, I didn't think much of it until I looked down.
That's the worst. That's the worst feeling. Walking into a spider web and doing this for the next 5-10 minutes, just everywhere, just trying to feel like, and then you don't know if the spider's on your body, so you looking yeah. Oh, that's the worst feeling in the world.
Down and saw about 20 to 30 baby spiders all over me.
Oh!
I started freaking out, then noticed the parents sitting on my door. They were huge, almost the size of a hand. So of course I didn't want to use the front door. I run to my back door, throw off all my clothes and jump in the shower. I then watch as the spiders began falling out of my hair.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
I got home late and my phone was about to die. I always plugged my phone into the outlet under my bed. I collapsed on my bed and reached my hand under my bed to try and find my phone's charger. But what I found instead was some kind of squishy sack. I began poking and squeezing it, when all of a sudden, I felt hundreds of little legs poking me and crawling up my arm. I pulled my arm up from under my bed and then screamed when I saw probably 30 baby spiders crawling up my arm. I shook them off, told my parents, and jumped in the shower right away. Turned out it was a baby spider sack, and there was an even bigger mother spider living under my bed.
Could you have gotten back in that bed? I couldn't either. They'd have had to throw that, burn it, sell it. Yep. Oh, Oh, and just imagine how many nights you have been sleeping and didn't know. Oh.
I awoke from my deep sleep in the middle of the night to the feeling of something huge crawling around in my bed. Still half asleep, I jumped out and started freaking out, assuming it was a spider or something. With one swift motion of bravery, I flung the covers off the bed, but nothing was there. I started to think that I was just feeling it as part of a dream, and I continued to feel it until I fully woke up. So I went back to sleep. The next night, I felt the same exact thing. I felt it on my arms this time instead of my legs. Again, I jumped out of bed, still not in the fully awake state of mind. I was again freaking out and ran to my parents' room to get my dad. He was never afraid of spiders. He came to my room and flung off the sheets and covers. There was nothing there. I was convinced at this point that it had something to do with my dreams, or something was wrong with me, because there was no spider in my bed whatsoever. However, the next night, it happened again. The feeling of something huge crawling on my arm. Freaking out again, in my half-awake, confused state of mind, I once again jumped out of bed and flung off the covers, but this time I was greeted by the sight of the biggest spider I'd ever seen. Bigger than a tarantula. It quickly crawled under my bed and out of sight as I screamed and went off to my parents' room again to tell my dad. This happened when I was staying with my grandma for the weekend.
Oh, see? That's why you never want to go back to grandma's house after this.
My uncle still lived with her, and occasionally I would stay over to work with my uncle for some good pay. Anyway, I was exhausted after a long day's work with my uncle, so I basically fell into the rickety old guest bed upstairs. I watched some TV for about 10 minutes before just deciding to go to sleep. It was a hot night. You know how on hot nights you constantly have to flip over the pillow to the cooler side? Well, when I did that, I put my head back down on the pillow. I didn't feel the soft, cushiony pillow on my cheek. I felt a furry, indescribable object press up on my face. I jumped up in response to it and saw a giant, full-grown huntsman spider sitting on my pillow. I fell to the opposite side of the bed, and I guess the shaking scared the thing because it took off at the speed of light. Where it went, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure the thing is still in my grandma's house.
Yeah, I probably could have did without that one. I'm sure I could have did without that video right there. Like the entire time, I felt like something was crawling on me. Yep. Yeah, man, I'm done. It's your boy L, man. Till the next reaction, I'm out. Peace. Y'all stay solid. Hey.